that black spot on your tomato leaves, the white dust on your squash, the rust creeping up your beans. You don't need a $40 bottle to stop it. You need something that already sits under your kitchen sink. A brown bottle, less than $1. We have used it for generations. Long before the garden center put a fancy label on a problem, we solved with 3 things from the pantry. Stay with me, because around the middle of this, I am going to show you the exact mix my grandfather used to carry his whole tomato patch through a wet July for less than the price of a cup of coffee, the way the plain people have always done it. But first, tell me one thing down in the comments. What state are you growing in, and what is eating your plants right now? Black spot, powdery mildew, rust, just type the one word. I read them, and what zone you are in changes the timing of everything I am about to tell you. I was raised in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and I can still see my grandfather standing at the edge of the kitchen garden after a rain, the morning steam coming off the soil, a glass jar in his hand. No store, no bottle with a skull on the back, just water and that brown bottle and a little soap. He would walk the rows slow, and he would say the same thing every time. The good Lord gives you the cure right next to the sickness. You just have to know where to look. Now, here is what nobody at the big store wants you to sit and think about. Fungicide is one of the most marked up things they sell you. You walk in for a problem on your zucchini, and you walk out lighter by $30, $40, sometimes $50. And that little bottle, you will use it twice, and it loses strength by the next season. So you come back, and you buy it again. That is the whole game. They do not profit from you knowing the cure is already in your house. They profit from you forgetting. And the cost adds up in ways you do not even count. It is not just the money. It is the tomato plant you babied since May that goes yellow and crisp in 3 weeks. It is the cucumber vine covered in white powder by August. It is the roses your mother gave you, spotted and bare by July. You did everything right. You watered, you weeded, you pulled the bad leaves. And still it spread because by the time you saw it, it was already too late. That is the part that stings. Fungus does not announce itself. By the time you see the spot, the thing that made the spot has been living on that leaf for days. It is already making more of itself. It is already drifting to the next plant on the morning wind. So you spray the expensive stuff, and it helps a little, and then it rains and it washes away, and you are back where you started, watching good plants die slow. My people never lived like that. We could not. When you grow most of what your family eats, you cannot afford to lose a row, and you cannot afford to drive to town and hand over $40 every time the weather turns wet. So we learned to work with what was always on hand. And the thing that was always on hand was hydrogen peroxide. Now I know what you are thinking. The same little brown bottle you put on a scraped knee, that cannot be a fungicide. That cannot do what the expensive stuff does. Let me tell you exactly why it does. And once you understand it, you will never look at that bottle the same way again. Hydrogen peroxide is just water with one extra piece of oxygen stuck on. Water is 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen. Peroxide is 2 hydrogen and 2 oxygen. That 1 extra oxygen is loose. It does not want to stay attached. It is hungry to break away. And when peroxide touches a fungus spore, that extra oxygen rips loose and attacks it. It burns the cell wall of that spore right open. Fungus and mold and that slimy rot, they all breathe in a low oxygen, wet, still way. A sudden burst of pure oxygen is poison to them. It is like throwing open every window in a damp, moldy cellar. The thing that was thriving in the dark and the wet suddenly cannot survive. And here is the beautiful part. The moment it is done, that extra oxygen floats off into the air. And what is left behind on your leaf is plain water. Nothing toxic. Nothing that builds up in your soil. Nothing your grandchildren cannot stand next to while you spray. It does the work, and then it disappears. This is not folklore. Researchers know exactly why it works. Hydrogen peroxide is what they call an oxidizing agent, and university plant scientists have used the same chemistry for years to clean fungus off seeds and out of greenhouse water systems. There is a whole class of commercial fungicides whose active ingredient is nothing but a stabilized form of this very thing. Same chemistry, same loose oxygen. They just put it in a bottle with a name you cannot pronounce and charge you 10 times the price. Think about that. The thing they sell you as a high-tech fungicide and the thing my grandfather kept in the pantry are doing the exact same job. One extra oxygen, breaking loose, burning out the rot. The outside world did not invent a new cure. They just learned to charge for the old one. So here is how you actually make it. This is the recipe, and I want you to get it right because too strong will burn your leaves and too weak will not touch the fungus. Start with the regular brown bottle. The kind that is 3%, that is the standard strength you find anywhere for under $1. You are going to take 1 tablespoon of that 3% peroxide and mix it into 1 cup of water. If you are making a bigger batch for a whole garden, that comes out to about 4 tablespoons of peroxide for every quart of water, or 1 cup of peroxide to a gallon if you are filling a pump sprayer for the whole yard. Now, the secret most people miss, add a few drops of plain liquid soap, not the antibacterial kind, not dish soap loaded with degreaser, just plain, mild soap. A 1/4 teaspoon to the quart is plenty. That soap is what makes the spray actually stick to the leaf instead of beating up and rolling off. My grandmother used a sliver of the same soap she washed the milk pails with. The soap breaks the surface so the peroxide spreads flat across the leaf and reaches into every little ridge where the spores hide. Mix it fresh. This is important. Peroxide starts giving up that extra oxygen the moment it is exposed to light and air, which is exactly why it comes in a dark brown bottle. So you do not mix a big jug and store it for a month. You mix what you will use that day. It costs pennies, so there is no reason to hoard it. Now, when do you spray? And this is where most folks go wrong, and then blame the cure. Spray in the early morning or the evening. Never in the hot middle of the day with the sun beating straight down. A wet leaf in full sun can scorch, and peroxide on a leaf in blazing sun can leave little burnt spots. My grandfather always went out at first light when the air was still cool and the dew was just lifting. The leaves were already a little damp, the spores were active, and the sun was not yet high enough to do any harm. Get the underside of the leaves, not just the top. This is the part 9 out of 10 people skip, and it is the whole ball game. Fungus loves the underside. It is shaded, it stays damp longer, and that is where the spores set up house. If you only hit the tops, you are leaving the nursery untouched. So tip your sprayer up and get under there. How often? For prevention, once a week is plenty. If you already have an outbreak, if you can see the spots spreading, go every 3 to 4 days until it stops, then drop back to once a week. After a hard rain, spray again because the rain washed your protection away and the wet leaves are exactly what the fungus was waiting for. And there it is. 3 things. Water, the brown bottle, and a little soap. The same thing the garden center turns into a $40 problem sitting in your cabinet right now for under $1. And if you want all of this written down in one place, the exact ratios, the timing charts, the old season remedies my grandfather never had to look up because they were handed to him. I want to tell you about something we put together. We collected the deep practical knowledge from generations of plain people gardening into a resource called the Garden Blueprint Old-Fashioned Pest Cures that cost pennies, part of a full set that includes the Harvest Blueprint Amish Soil and Storage Secrets for Bigger Yields. Everything is in the Complete Garden Field Edition, and you can find it linked in the description below for $97, less than 3 trips to the garden center for bottles that do not work half as well. It is the kind of reference you keep on the shelf next to the brown bottle, because once you have the why written down, you never have to go looking for answers again. But let us get back to where the real damage happens and why the established garden is exactly where this shines. But here is where it gets bigger than just tomatoes. Because once you understand what that loose oxygen does, you start to see how many problems in your garden are really the same problem wearing different clothes. Take the white powder on your squash and your cucumbers and your zucchini, powdery mildew they call it. It looks like somebody dusted your leaves with flour. Most folks think it is a different beast entirely from the black spot on the tomatoes. It is not. It is fungus living on the leaf, and that same hungry oxygen tears it apart the same way. The only difference is powdery mildew sits right on the surface, almost begging to be wiped out, so the peroxide spray often works even faster on it. And the rust on your beans, those orange and brown bumps on the underside of the leaf, same family, same answer. Get under the leaf early morning once a week. Now here is the question that should be forming in your mind. If this one cheap thing handles black spot and mildew and rust, why on earth do they sell a different bottle for each one? Why is there a rose fungicide and a vegetable fungicide and a lawn fungicide, all different prices, all in different aisles? Because different bottles sell more bottles? That is the honest answer. An entire industry is built on making you believe every problem needs its own special product. My people never had a shelf full of bottles. We had one solution and we understood why it worked, and understanding is the thing they would rather you not have. Once you understand the why, you stop buying the what. Now, let me get ahead of something because I can hear the doubt. Somebody is thinking, my garden is not a fresh new plot. I have got tomato plants that are already 4 feet tall and already spotted. I have got rose bushes my wife planted 15 years ago. I have got an old established yard. This recovery business sounds like it is for people starting clean. It is not. And I want to talk to you especially because the established garden is exactly where this shines. Here is the truth about an old established garden. The fungus is already living in your soil. Those black spot spores, they spent the winter in the fallen leaves and the top inch of dirt around your plants. And every time it rains, the raindrops splash that soil up onto the lowest leaves, and that is how it starts all over again every single year. You are not fighting new fungus. You are fighting the same family that has lived in that bed for years. So this weekend, with nothing but that brown bottle, here's what you do. First, go to your tomatoes and your roses and look at the very bottom. Pull off every leaf that is touching the soil or within about a hand's width of the ground. Those bottom leaves are the landing pad. They are how the soil splash reaches the plant. Take them off and put them in the trash, not the compost. You just remove the latter, the fungus climbs. Second, mix your spray, the 1 tablespoon of peroxide to a cup of water with a few drops of soap, and spray the whole plant, top and underside, in the cool of the morning. Third, and this is the trick for an established bed that almost nobody tells you, take a thin layer of mulch, straw, or grass clippings or shredded leaves and lay it on the bare soil around the base of the plant. That mulch is a blanket. It stops the rain from splashing the soil up onto the leaves in the first place. You just cut off the fungus at its source without buying a single thing. Do those 3 steps this weekend on plants you have had for years, and you will see new growth come in clean. Not the old spotted leaves. Those are done. Leave them or trim the worst. But the new leaves up top will come in green and stay green, and that is how you know you broke the cycle. Now, I told you at the start I would give you the exact mix my grandfather carried his tomatoes through a wet July with. Here is the part most people never figure out. It was not just the peroxide. It was the timing, and the timing was tied to the weather. He watched for what he called the close mornings. The mornings where the air felt thick and the dew sat heavy and did not lift, where the leaves stayed wet long past sunrise. Fungus needs wet leaves for several hours to take hold. A spore lands, and if the leaf dries quick, the spore dies. But if the leaf stays wet for the better part of a morning, the spore sends out a little thread and pushes into the leaf, and now you have an infection. So he did not just spray on a schedule. He sprayed the evening before a closed, still, humid stretch. He could feel it coming, and by morning when the spores were trying to wake up and reach into the leaf, they reached into peroxide instead. He met the fungus before it ever got started. That is the difference between fighting a fire and never letting it catch. You can do the same thing without any feel for the weather because now you have the forecast on a little screen in your pocket. When you see 2 or 3 days of high humidity, warm nights, and morning fog or heavy dew coming, spray the evening before. That is when this cheap mix does its very best work, and it is the single thing that separates people who stop fungus from people who only chase it. But I promised you something more. The real secret, the one the plain people kept while the outside world forgot it, and it is not the peroxide itself. The peroxide is just the door. This is what is behind it. You can use that same brown bottle on your seeds and your soil before a single problem ever appears. And this is the part that the research finally caught up to. Here is the thing nobody in the garden aisle will ever tell you, because there is no money in it. Most of the damping off, the rot, the seedlings that flop over and die right at the soil line in spring, that is fungus living in the seed and in the wet starting soil. For generations, my people soaked seeds before planting. We did it with a weak peroxide solution, and we did not have a fancy name for it. We just knew the seeds came up stronger and faster, and fewer of them rotted in the cold spring ground. Now, the science, researchers at the land-grant agricultural colleges studied exactly this, and what they found is remarkable. A short soak in a dilute hydrogen peroxide solution before planting does two things at once. It kills the fungus and bacteria riding on the outside of the seed coat, and the extra oxygen actually softens that hard seed coat and signals the seed to wake up, so it sprouts faster and more evenly. Studies measured germination jumping by real margins, seeds coming up days earlier, and a noticeably higher percentage of them sprouting simply from a peroxide soak that costs almost nothing. Here's how you do it. Take that 1 tablespoon of 3% peroxide in 1 cup of water, drop your seeds in, let them soak for about 30 minutes, no longer than an hour. Then plant them as you normally would, damp from the soak. Beans, peas, corn, squash, cucumbers, tomatoes, the big seeds especially love this. You will see them break the soil days ahead of the dry planted ones, and you will see far fewer of them rot away in cold, wet spring dirt. And it goes one step further into the soil itself. If you have a bed where seedlings always seem to rot, where you plant and they damp off and die, water that soil with the same dilute mix a few days before you plant. That loose oxygen sweeps through the top of the soil and knocks back the fungus waiting there, and it puts oxygen down to the roots, which roots love. A root in oxygen-rich soil grows faster and resists rot. We knew the loosened, breathing soil grew the best plants. We just did not have the word oxygenation for it. So think about what you actually have now. You can stop fungus on the leaf with the spray. You can stop it at the source with the mulch and the bottom leaf trim. You can stop it before it ever begins with the seed soak and the soil drench, 1 brown bottle, under $1, doing the work of an entire shelf of products that would cost you well over $100 across a season, and not one of those products would do it any better. That is the part that ought to make you a little bit angry in a quiet way, because it means every season you reached for the expensive bottle, you were paying for a name and a label and an aisle, when the cure was already in your house, the way it was in my grandmother's house and her mother's house, going back further than anyone wrote down. Let me answer the questions I know are coming, because I have heard them all. Will it hurt the good bugs? No, not when it is mixed weak like this and sprayed on the leaves. It breaks down to water and oxygen within minutes. It is not like the harsh sprays that linger and kill the bees and the ladybugs along with the pests. By the time a bee visits that flower, the peroxide is long gone, back to plain water. Will it hurt the plant? Only if you mix it too strong or spray it in blazing midday sun. Stick to the 1 tablespoon to a cup, spray in the cool hours, and your plants will be fine. If you are nervous, test it on a few leaves first and check them the next day. You will see they are fine, and you will spray with confidence after that. Can you use the stronger peroxide, the kind for hair or cleaning? No. Stay with the 3% brown bottle. The stronger stuff is harder to measure, right, and easy to burn your plants with, and there is no reason to risk it when the cheap 3% does everything you need. Does it really last all season? The bottle does, easily, because you use so little each time. A single dollar bottle, mixed at this strength, will carry a good-sized home garden through weeks and weeks. The protection on the leaf does not last all season on its own. That is why you spray weekly and after rain. But the method, the knowing, that lasts the rest of your life. Once you understand the why, you never have to buy the answer again. And that is really what this is about. Not a bottle, a way of seeing. The outside world was sold a problem, a shelf full of bottles, each one promising to fix a thing the plain people fix for generations with water and oxygen and a sliver of soap. Somewhere along the way, the knowing got quietly taken from folks, traded for a receipt and a plastic jug. You did not lose it because it stopped working. You lost it because somebody profited from you forgetting. Well, now you have it back. And you are the kind of person who was never going to keep overpaying for what nature and the old ways already provide. That is why you watched this far. You already felt in your gut that it could not be as complicated and expensive as they made it seem. It never was, so do this for me. Down in the comments, tell me the 2 things I asked at the start. What state are you growing in, and what is on your plants right now? Black spot, powdery, mildew, rust, damping off in the spring. Just type the words. I read every one. and I answer what I can because the timing changes a little depending on where you are and what you are fighting. Do not just nod along and scroll past. Take the 10 seconds and write it. That is how I know who I am talking to, and that is how this stays a real conversation between neighbors instead of just me talking into the wind. And if you want more of the plain ways, the ones the outside world forgot and is only now catching up to, come along with us. This is not about following a channel. It is about a bunch of us recovering the practical knowledge that was always meant to be handed down, neighbor to neighbor, the way it was handed to me. Because the next thing I want to show you is what my grandfather did with plain wood ash from the stove, the gray powder most people sweep out and throw away. He used it to keep slugs and soft-bodied bugs off his cabbage and his strawberries, and to sweeten the soil for the plants that hate acid, all from the bucket beside the wood stove that the rest of the world treats as trash. It is one of the oldest tricks the plain people kept, and it costs you absolutely nothing. Keep that brown bottle on your shelf, mix it fresh, spray in the cool morning, get the underside of the leaf, and lay down your mulch this weekend. Do that, and the fungus that used to win every August does not stand a chance. You held the cure the whole time. Now you know it.